The men's 3,000 meters steeplechase final at the Commonwealth Games was not just another championship race. It was a precise case study in how dominance is maintained and how it begins to erode under pressure from emerging global challengers. What unfolded in Birmingham was a controlled Kenyan execution under threat, where tactics, biomechanics, and race intelligence determined the outcome more than raw speed alone. From a structural standpoint, the race was defined within the first 600 meters. The Kenyan trio, Abraham Kibiwot, Conseslus Kipruto, and Amos Serem, immediately positioned themselves at the front, eliminating uncertainty in pacing. This is a classic Kenyan steeplechase strategy. Remove tactical variability early and convert the race into a physiological test at high speed. By forcing a 2:39 opening kilometer, they effectively eliminated any athlete lacking both aerobic capacity and technical efficiency over barriers. This early surge served a dual function. First, it stretched the field into single-file formation, increasing the psychological and physical cost of remaining competitive. Second, it amplified the importance of barrier efficiency. At such speeds, even minor inefficiencies, slightly stuttered steps, suboptimal takeoff angles, or unstable water jump landings, compound rapidly. Kenyan athletes, due to years of specialized training, minimize vertical oscillation and maintain forward momentum with remarkable consistency. Their hurdle clearance is not just clean, it is rhythmically integrated into their stride pattern. However, the most critical disruption to this controlled scenario came from Avinash Sable. Unlike the rest of the field, Sable made an early commitment to the leading group. This decision fundamentally altered the race dynamics. Instead of a predictable Kenyan sweep, the race evolved into a four-man contest much earlier than expected. Sable's positioning was not just brave, it was technically sound. He maintained close proximity without overstriding, preserving his running economy. This is crucial in steeplechase. Chasing too aggressively often leads to inefficient barrier approaches. Sable avoided this trap, demonstrating improved spatial awareness and timing, particularly over the water jump, where many athletes lose up to half a second per lap due to poor landing mechanics. By the second kilometer, 2:47 split, the race transitioned from aggressive sorting to controlled attrition. The slight deceleration was not a sign of weakness, but a recalibration phase. The Kenyan trio maintained control, but the presence of Sable prevented any tactical relaxation. Behind them, the race had already fragmented, confirming that the opening kilometer had successfully neutralized the rest of the field. The decisive phase began with approximately 800 meters remaining. This is where race intelligence becomes critical. Abraham Kibiwot initiated a progressive surge rather than a sudden kick. This type of move is particularly effective in steeplechase because it increases fatigue incrementally while forcing competitors to make repeated high-cost decisions at each barrier. Every acceleration must be matched not only on the flat sections, but also in the approach and clearance phases. At this point, a key narrative emerged: the decline of Conseslus Kipruto relative to his peak years. Historically, Kipruto's strength lay in his ability to absorb pace changes and deliver a powerful final lap. In Birmingham, however, his response to Kibiwot's surge was delayed. This hesitation created a gap that he could not close, highlighting the fine margins that define elite steeplechase racing. Even a slight reduction in anaerobic capacity or neuromuscular sharpness can be decisive. Sable's reaction, in contrast, was immediate. Moving into second position, he demonstrated a rare combination of endurance and technical composure. His barrier clearance remained consistent despite the increased pace, which is often where non-Kenyan athletes falter. Importantly, Sable minimized ground contact time after each landing, allowing him to maintain momentum and gradually reduce the gap to the leader. The final lap encapsulated the entire race narrative. Abraham Kibiwot led, but his form showed signs of accumulated fatigue, slightly higher knee lift over barriers, and marginally longer ground contact times. These are subtle indicators, but at this level, they signal vulnerability. Sable, sensing this, increased his cadence rather than his stride length, a more efficient way to accelerate late in a race. The final water jump became the pivotal technical moment. Kibiwot executed it with precision: flat trajectory, stable landing, immediate transition back into sprint mechanics. Sable matched the effort, but required a fractionally longer stabilization phase after landing. That difference, measured in tenths of a second, ultimately defined the race outcome. In the final 100 meters, Sable closed rapidly, but Kibiwot's earlier positioning and energy distribution proved decisive. The Kenyan crossed the line in 8:11, securing gold and extending Kenya's historical dominance in the event. However, the margin was significantly narrower than in previous championship races. Sable's silver medal performance carries broader implications. His run was not an isolated breakthrough, but part of a larger trend in global steeplechase development. Improved access to training methodologies, international competition exposure, and technical coaching has enabled athletes outside Kenya to close the gap. Sable's performance demonstrated that it is now possible to match Kenyan athletes not only in endurance, but also in technical execution. From an analytical perspective, this race highlights three key trends. First, Kenyan dominance remains rooted in system-level advantages: depth of talent, specialized training environments, and technical mastery. Second, the gap is narrowing due to the globalization of knowledge and training practices. Third, race outcomes are increasingly determined by micro-level factors: barrier efficiency, pacing precision, and tactical decision-making under fatigue. In conclusion, the Birmingham Steeplechase final was not just about who won, it was about how the race was contested. Abraham Kibiwot delivered a tactically flawless performance under pressure, while Avinash Sable redefined expectations for non-Kenyan athletes in the discipline. The result preserved the existing hierarchy, but the process revealed its increasing fragility. Future championships are unlikely to be as predictable, and that is precisely what makes the evolution of the steeplechase so compelling. The second layer of analysis lies in the microdynamics of energy distribution and how each of the leading athletes managed physiological stress under increasing fatigue. At this level, the race is not simply about maintaining pace, it is about controlling how and when the body begins to fail. For Abraham Kibiwot, the defining feature of his performance was controlled aggression. Unlike many frontrunners who rely on a single decisive surge, Kibiwot applied sustained pressure across multiple phases of the race. This approach is particularly effective in steeplechase because it prevents competitors from settling into a stable rhythm. Every slight increase in pace forces adjustments not only in running speed, but also in stride pattern approaching each barrier. Over time, these adjustments increase neuromuscular fatigue and raise the likelihood of technical errors. Kibiwot's stride mechanics remained compact and efficient deep into the race. His center of mass stayed relatively stable over barriers, minimizing vertical displacement. This is a critical factor. Excessive vertical motion wastes energy and disrupts forward momentum. By maintaining a low, forward-oriented trajectory, he preserved just enough efficiency to withstand the late challenge. In contrast, Avinash Sable demonstrated a different but equally effective model: progressive adaptation. Rather than dictating the race early, he allowed the Kenyan trio to establish the tempo and then calibrated his effort to remain within reach. This approach requires exceptional internal pacing awareness. If the gap becomes too large, the race is lost. If the effort is too intense too early, the athlete risks complete physiological breakdown in the final laps. What made Sable's performance exceptional was his ability to delay the onset of fatigue-related technical deterioration. In many steeplechase races, non-Kenyan athletes begin to lose efficiency over the barriers in the final kilometer. Takeoff points become inconsistent, landing phases become unstable, and stride rhythm collapses. Sable avoided these issues for most of the race. His barrier clearance remained synchronized with his stride, allowing him to conserve energy and maintain speed. However, The final stages revealed the smallest margin where the race was decided. Fatigue does not appear suddenly. It accumulates subtly, and in steeplechase, it is often expressed through micro-errors. For Sable, this manifested in slightly longer ground contact times after the final water jump and a marginal delay in reaccelerating. These details are almost invisible to the casual viewer, but are decisive at the elite level. Another important dimension of the race was the internal competition within the Kenyan team. Conseslus Kipruto and Amos Serem were not simply supporting actors. They were potential winners. However, the shift in pace initiated by Kibiwot exposed differences in current form. Kipruto, once defined by his closing strength, showed a reduced capacity to respond to sustained mid-race surges. This suggests a change not only in physical condition, but also in race profile. Athletes evolve over time, and strategies that once defined them may become less effective. Serem, on the other hand, displayed strong early positioning, but lacked the endurance to sustain the pace in the decisive phase. This highlights another key aspect of steeplechase development, transitioning from junior success to senior consistency. The ability to handle championship-level pacing over 3,000 meters with barriers requires not only talent, but also years of physiological adaptation. From a broader tactical perspective, the race illustrates how modern steeplechase is shifting away from purely reactive racing toward proactive control. In previous eras, championship finals often featured slower early laps, followed by explosive finishes. In Birmingham, the aggressive opening kilometer eliminated that possibility. The race was effectively decided by sustained pressure rather than a single final sprint. This evolution favors athletes who combine endurance, technique, and tactical intelligence. Pure speed is no longer sufficient. Athletes must be able to maintain technical precision under extreme fatigue while making rapid tactical decisions. The presence of Amos Serem in the lead group is evidence that these skills are no longer exclusive to Kenyan runners. Another critical factor is psychological resilience. Running with the Kenyan trio carries an inherent pressure. For decades, they have defined the standard in this event, and many athletes are psychologically defeated before the race even unfolds. Sable's willingness to engage directly with them, rather than settle into a secondary group, represents a shift in mindset. This psychological breakthrough is as important as any physical improvement. Looking ahead, the implications of this race are significant. The narrowing gap suggests that future championships, whether at the Olympic Games or World Championships, will feature more unpredictable outcomes. Kenyan athletes will still enter as favorites, but they will face increasingly sophisticated challenges from a global field that is rapidly improving in both fitness and technique. In conclusion, the second layer of this race is about precision under pressure. Abraham Kibiwot executed a near-perfect race by combining controlled pacing, technical efficiency, and tactical awareness. Amos Serem, meanwhile, delivered a performance that pushed the boundaries of what is possible for non-Kenyan athletes in the steeplechase. The difference between gold and silver was not a matter of seconds, but of moments. Tiny, technical, and physiological details that ultimately defined the outcome.